What's going on, everybody? The original Mako back with some more Gunfire Reborn content, and today we're going to be talking about the best inscriptions at each tier: normal, elite, exclusive, and we'll rank the Gemini inscriptions. But before we get into it, be sure you check the links down below. As always, if you want to see me use these inscriptions live on stream, the Twitch link is down below. We have a bunch of fun over there, so come check that out. Also, if you want to join the lovely people on screen and become a member on YouTube today, you can check out that link down below as well. There are 4 tiers that all come with unique perks, and it helps the channel out a ton. So I'd really appreciate if you check that out. It'd mean a lot to me. And like I said, it really helps to support the channel. So I would really appreciate it. But that being said, let's go ahead and talk about these inscriptions, So I'm going to be doing the top 5 for me for the normal, elite, and exclusive categories. And then there's only 4 Gemini inscriptions, so I'm going to rank the 4 Geminis based on my opinion, obviously. And I'm trying to stick to inscriptions that cover a wide variety of weapons. Like when we get to the exclusive inscriptions, I'm not doing any exclusive inscriptions that can only be on one weapon. So I'm trying to keep it as inclusive as possible. There's a couple cases where I just can't do inscriptions that are, that every single weapon can get, but I try to do it as much as I could. So we're going to start with the normal inscriptions here. And number 5 for me is going to be the rate of fire plus 25%. I mean, rate of fire in general, that's just a DPS increase. Now, the reason this is number 5 and not higher is because rate of fire can potentially be a bad thing. For example, if you're having ammo issues, if you're using, a Crimson Fire scale and you're having a lot of trouble controlling the recoil, then the rate of fire can be kind of a problem, right? So you don't really want that 25% up. But more often than not, the rate of fire increase is going to be just a net positive to your DPS. Your run's going to go a lot smoother. There's a lot of other synergies in terms of scrolls and characters that benefit from the rate of fire up. So in general, this is a really good inscription you want to look for. Once again, very specific scenarios where it's not, but overall, this is a really good one. Next, number 2 is going to be, number 4, I guess, is going to be the minus 40% reload time. Just a flat 40% reload time. For a somewhat similar reason here, this is just going to be a DPS increase because you're going to be reloading faster. You're going to be shooting your gun again faster. This can drop on any weapon. It's nothing but a positive. I can't think of a scenario where this is bad to add, where you wouldn't want this. I can't. It's just really good overall. Some weapons have a super long reload time, and this makes them feel infinitely better. Some weapons already have a fast reload time, and this makes it even more fun. There's just not a scenario where I feel like this is an inscription you wouldn't want to see. You wouldn't see a weapon and go, oh, it's got minus 40% reload time. Are you serious? It's just always good. So that's why I have it as number 4 on this list. Next up, we're going to go to number 3, which is going to be the plus 80% accuracy and plus 80% stability buff. This one is, I think, really good because, as you can see in the comments section here, it's very useful for multiple different types of weapons. You're getting an accuracy buff, so if you're using a shotgun, the spread is going to be more controlled. If you're using a Crimson Fire scale where you need to crit, then your bullets are going to be going down the center more often. It's going to be more predictable. The stability is nice, so you don't have to worry about controlling the recoil as much on an Angelic Aura or any other super big hit. Well, Big Hippo is pretty stable. Any other really fast firing weapon. Or, once again, the Crimson Fire scale is a really good example of this. So, accuracy and stability, I think, is super useful. I was debating going range accuracy or range stability, but I think the combination of accuracy and stability is the best of those 3, personally. And I think most weapons get a benefit from this. like a really solid benefit from the accuracy and stability buff. Once again, I cannot really think of a scenario where this is something you wouldn't want to have. So that's why I have it as number 3 on the list. Going into number 2 for the normal is going to be piercing +1 and projectile speed +100%. As you can see, it allows shots to pierce enemies and hit enemies behind them, dealing damage to both. Another example of like, this is something with 0 downsides and something you would never be upset to see. The projectile speed is nice. Your bullets are getting there quicker. You're going to be hitting your enemies more often, and they can now pierce either through one enemy or through a shield. Especially early game, you see a bunch of enemies that have these, the shields, like the horse heads, and being able to pierce through is so useful. It's ridiculous. So that's why I have piercing on here. Piercing in general is just amazing, and when there's no drawback, just benefits, it had to make this list as number 2 on our best normal inscriptions for just any weapon, really. And then number 1 for me is going to be the other reload speed inscription, minus 55% reload time when loading an empty mag. So, similar to the 40% earlier that we looked at, this one is it's 15% faster, which is a significant increase in reload speed. And yes, you're not going to be getting the buff every single time, only when you have an empty mag. But if you think about it, and I'm really bad at this, I have a bad habit of this because of my Call of Duty history. But theoretically, you shouldn't be reloading unless your mag is empty, or if you're not in danger. Like, if you still have bullets in the mag, you shouldn't really be reloading them unless you're safe, or that's about it, really. That's the only time you should. And I'm really bad at this, but theoretically, you're going to be getting this buff when you need it, and when you don't need the reload speed buff because you're safe, you're switching rooms, you just killed everything, whatever, you don't need the reload speed buff. And 55% makes every single weapon reload so much faster, and it's just super satisfying to get this on a weapon, any weapon, and it's really, really beneficial as well. So that's why I have it as number 1 for our list of normal inscriptions here. Next, we'll move on to the rare inscriptions and go through the top 5. And this is the one where this one and the exclusive one, it's almost impossible to get a top 5 without having some that only apply to certain weapons. So that's kind of why some of these are going to be, only certain weapons can get them. But first and foremost, we're going to go with number 5 here, which I think goes to the plus 5% rate of fire for 2 seconds on a crit, up to 75%. So every time you get a crit, you shoot faster, which theoretically means you're going to crit faster, which means you're going to keep shooting faster all the way up to 75%. And it's a 2-second buff, which is a good chunk of time in this game, honestly. And it's obviously a stacking buff. And like I said earlier, rate of fire is something that sometimes you might not want it, but the majority of the time, a rate of fire increase is going to be massive and something you really want to use to just pump out DPS. So being able to get a stacking buff on crit and it going all the way up to 75% is insane. And it can drop on pretty much any weapon that can crit. So I think that's a really useful one and why we're going to put it at number 5 on this list. The next one, and this one's a little bit gimmicky, which is why I'm using this website or the wiki so I can show you guys why this is on here. Plus 150% lucky shot for the next shot after critting 3 times in a row. Why is this on here? Well, the description is not right, actually. So 3 successive crits will cause all of your shots to gain lucky shot for the 150% bonus for a few seconds. And it can be refreshed repeatedly. So if you're using a fast firing weapon and you're hitting 3 crits every few seconds, you theoretically have infinite 150% lucky shot buff. which lucky shot buff is amazing, and 150% is nothing to shake a stick at. So this one is a little bit confusing because it's the description's wrong, but when you know how it works, it's really, really useful. And same with the rate of fire before. As long as you're critting and using a weapon that can crit often, this is going to absolutely slap. So that's why you're going to want it, and that's why I put it at number 4 on our list here. Next up at number 3, and this one really could have been number 1 in my opinion. I think it might be number 1, but because it only applies to elemental weapons, I have it at 3. So when triggering elemental effect, you spread it to all enemies within 8 meters. Obviously, only applies to elemental weapons. But my God, elemental spread in this game, I've said it before, I think elemental builds are the most consistent for beating the game. I think they're super good. They're super useful. They're just really, really good. And when you can spread your elemental effects to every enemy within 8 meters, every time it triggers, I mean, it is ridiculous the amount of elemental spreadage you have going on. So, like I said, this could be number 1. I think it probably is number 1, honestly, but because it only applies to elemental weapons, that's why I moved it down to number 3. So, there you have it. Next up, we have, assuming I can find it quick enough here, we have the projectile plus 0.2 for every enemy killed, and it resets after reload. So there's a lot of ways to get your ammo infinite or close to infinite, and a projectile increase is just, once again, projectiles is one of the best ways to quickly increase your DPS, because if you get up to the cap of +2 projectiles, that means every shot you're shooting like 3 projectiles. So you're doing triple damage just immediately. And even if you don't have a way to get an infinite magazine going, you're still going to get a lot of use out of the projectile increase on a lot of different weapons. Some weapons, it's not going to be super useful, I know, but I think the majority of the time you're going to be getting a good amount of use out of the projectile increase. And like I said, I'm just a huge fan of projectile increase. I just think it's so good for increasing your DPS quickly and rapidly. So that's why we have the projectile plus 0.2 at number 2 on our list here. And then number 1 on the list for me is the 10% lucky shot chance for every 10% ammo consumed in the total magazine capacity, up to 100%, and it resets on reload or weapon switch. So earlier we had the 150% lucky shot chance when you crit 3 times, which in theory is better than this one, but you also have to be critting. And for somebody who plays on like Reincarnation 8, there's a lot of scenarios where you're obviously trying to crit as much as you can, assuming you have a weapon that can crit. There's also a lot of times where, you're more focused on defense and dodging and moving around as opposed to offense, and you don't have time to crit. You just have to get in some shots. Also, this one, when it comes to low magazine weapons, you get most of the snipers, you get any of the mortar is a really good one. Anything with a low magazine is going to get a lot of use out of this as well. And a lot of the things we've talked about have been really good for high magazine weapons. So it felt good to throw one in here that is actually super useful for low magazine weapons as well. But I think a weapon with any size magazine, except for one, is really good here. And you can see in the comment section, if you get something like Against the Flow, then you're going to get the 100% buff the whole game, pretty much, which is super useful as well. Lucky Shot, along with projectiles, is a very, very, very good way to increase your DPS rapidly. So that's why I put that one at number 1. And now we get to the fun ones, the exclusives. So once again, when we look here, there's barely any exclusive inscriptions that can get on any weapon. There's only one. So the rest of these are somewhat, you can't get them on everything, but I avoided going into any of the weapon-specific exclusives. So let's talk about our top 5 here, shall we? Number 5, I'm actually going to give to the 65% damage against enemies and elemental effect. A, because it's so versatile, you can get it on any single weapon in the game. And B, because the majority of the time in your run, you are going to have some way, whether it's with your weapon, whether it's with character abilities, whether it's with a scroll, some sort of way to do elemental damage and get elemental procs on an enemy. Some runs you won't, but a lot of the time you will. So I think you're going to get some sort of use out of this the majority of the time you find it. It's by no means amazing because there are some cases where you won't get any use out of it, but because of the fact that it can spawn on any weapon, and I mean, it's a 65% damage buff. That is a massive, massive damage buff. So that's why I put it up on the list, but it is number 5. Number 4 is going to go to projectiles +1, consumption +100. So like I said earlier, projectile increase, like this just, and essentially, like it says, effectively it doubles your fire rate. And if you don't have to reload, it doubles your damage. Which once again, we talked about it. There's a lot of ways to do that. But in general, just getting that double projectile is going to do a lot of things for you. So immediately getting an extra projectile means you have extra chance to get lucky shot. You have extra chance to get elemental procs. There's a lot of scrolls that benefit from it. There's a lot of characters that'll benefit from it. So increasing the projectiles not only increases fire rate, potentially increases DPS, but it also increases just a lot of your damage output and elemental output in general. And once again, assuming you have some way to deal with this consumption +100, this is going to be a super, super useful inscription on a lot of the weapons. So we have that one at number 4. Next up, we have the, where is it? This one. 5% lucky shot chance for 3 seconds whenever you hit an enemy, up to 100%. I don't need to say too much more about lucky shot, I don't think. Lucky shot is very, very good. With this one, you don't have to crit. It only goes up to 100, but you don't have to hit any crits. You can just keep stacking this. As long as you're hitting an enemy, you're dealing more lucky shot chance. You're hitting harder. You're killing things faster. Lucky shot is just really, really useful. So that's why we have this one at number 3. I mean, it's just a really good overall thing to have. Once again, it obviously, like it says, it's very useful for higher rate of fire, but you still get some use out of it on lower fire rate weapons as well. So that's why we have it on our list at number 3. Number 2, one of the more fun ones I've ever used. After killing 5 enemies, bullets will home in on nearby enemies' weak points with increased crit for 10 seconds. This one is so much fun. If you get it on a demon lore, if you get it on any weapon, you kill 5 enemies and then all of your bullets just track right onto enemies' heads or their crit spot for 10 seconds, and you get increased crit. It is so useful for killing things quickly, for getting, extra procs, anything that benefits from you critting. You're going to be hitting a lot harder. I mean, it is so much fun when it happens and extremely useful for obvious reasons. So that's why I have this one at number 2. I mean, it's just a really, really useful inscription to have. Once again, you can get it on most rifles and SMGs, and it's a super fun exclusive to find and use. So that's the one we have at number 4. And number 1 goes to, a lot of you probably saw this one coming, the balls, baby. All the balls. Now, I will rank the balls for you, but any of the elemental balls on crit in general are amazing. Amazing. It's a way to get an extra elemental type you don't have to cause extra elemental damage that you're already doing, like of the same elemental type. There are so many benefits that come from these. It is absolutely insane. So you have an 80% chance to create a elemental ball on a crit hit, which means almost every time you crit, it's going to be happening. Now, in order from worst to best, the worst ball is the corrosion ball. It's the worst one because it drifts slowly through the air to deal corrosion damage to one enemy at any range. It deals damage and is affected by skill, whatever. So unless there's only one enemy in the room, this will never hit the same enemy that you're shooting at. It's going to go find another enemy, and it does drift very slowly. So it's not, I'm not a very big fan of this one at all. It is still nice to get extra elemental damage and extra corrosive damage, but the fact that you can't use it on the enemy you just hit is kind of frustrating because a lot of times in the game, you're trying to kill a very specific enemy first because it's a problem. This doesn't help with that too much, but it is still useful. The next best one is Fireball. So it falls on the ground in place and detonates after about a second. So you hit them, the fireball spawns, drops, blows up. It hits the enemy that you were shooting at, potentially some other enemies, and does fire damage. It hits for 500% of your weapon base damage. It's really, really useful and a really, really great ball, honestly. And then we get on to the third one here, which is the best one in my opinion, and that is the lightning ball on crit. The only reason this one's better, I mean, these two are really close, but this one hovers in the air, repeatedly dealing lightning damage to nearby enemies. So it's going to be sitting up in the air, and it's going to be shocking a bunch of different enemies around you, and it's just going to be hitting like an absolute truck. So that's why it is going to be the best one, in my opinion, and just super, super useful for dealing extra lightning damage, extra elemental damage, and just a lot of really good things that come out of the lightning ball. And just the elemental balls in general. They're so useful. So there we go for the exclusives. And that's going to be it for like top 5 rankings, because Gemini, there's only 4. So we're going to go through them, and I'm going to rank the 4 Geminis. But here's what I'll say for Geminis. Geminis are very, very, and it's like anything in this game, very, very dependent on your build. So any of these could be the number 1 option depending on what type of build you're doing. But I'm going to rank them based on what I think is the most useful for a given build or a given scenario. So my number 4 is going to go to the weapon 1 and 2 combine their crit bonuses, but you get less stability. Once again, this could be really, really useful on a lot of weapons. What the hell? That's weird timing. It could be really, really useful on a lot of weapons, but a lot of the time, the other option's just better unless you're going for a specifically a crit build, then it's going to be good. But if you're not, this one doesn't have as much of a use. And even if you're doing a crit build, like, it is really useful, but I don't think it has as much of an impact as some of the other ones do. So that's going to be number 4. Number 3 is going to go to the weapon, magazine, and rate of fire up. Once again, a rate of fire up is fantastic. Combining magazine sizes is really useful as well. And because you're combining magazine sizes and getting a rate of fire up, your DPS is going to drastically increase. It's just really useful on a lot of builds. It's never really a bad thing to have. Once again, you know, you get a tiger cannon and a big hippo, combined magazine sizes, all of a sudden you've got 150 tiger cannon shots, right? The wild hunt is another good one where you just keep firing that wild hunt rapidly and having a good time. So it's really good. I just don't think it has as much of an impact as the other two, but really, really useful as well. Number 2 is going to go to the new Spore Gemini. I mean, this one, there's a lot going on here. As you can see in the comment section, like, it's a lot of reading, a lot of trying to understand. Essentially, if you have a weapon and then you have a shotgun, whether it's an Argus, whether it's a Porcupine, whatever it is, you basically just rapidly increase the damage you're doing. So you can read through all this if you want, but this is a super reliable way to just pump damage for a lot of weapons, assuming you have a shotgun in your back pocket. If you want to just do a lot of extra damage, you can do this. So it works if you're specifically building for it. It works if you're not building for it. It's just really, really good. I don't know what else to say. It's ever since they changed it, the damage output for the Spore Gemini has been ridiculous. And last, certainly not least, number one for me is the weapon share elemental effect. I've said it before. I've said it in this video. Elemental builds are, I think, the most consistent, and elemental combo effects are ridiculous. Miasma is ridiculous. I forget what it's called, but the fire lightning, where you mind control enemies, is not ridiculous, but very useful. And then explosion from fire and corrosion is extremely useful as well. And being able to get that on one weapon, and being able to pick and choose kind of whatever you want is I mean, it's just amazing. It's good if you're building for it. It's good if you're not building for it. It is just good overall. And that's why I would put it at number one on the list for Geminis. But once again, Geminis especially, depending on how you're building, any of these could be your top option. But those are just my opinions of how I would rank them. So that's it. There we have it. A full video on inscriptions. I have never done a video on inscriptions before, so I felt it was a good time to do it. A lot of these inscriptions can be really good and really useful, and a lot of you guys will probably have different opinions, and I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Yes, I know. Listen, guys, I promise. You probably have heard him whining a little bit. I promise he's fine. He's just being dramatic. Trust me. But anyways, yeah, let me know your thoughts on some of the inscriptions down below. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for the support, as always. Hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I love each and every one of your faces, and I will catch you all in the next video.